Shalom. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to read Matthew chapter 10. Starting this chapter here, I'll read the first few verses here. I'm reading from the New International Version. Now, this is the chapter where Jesus takes his 12 disciples and sends them out on their very first mission trip, if you want to call it that, their very first preaching expedition. Let's just take a look at the first 4 verses to begin with, okay? Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Now, these first 4 verses are interesting to me. It's interesting because there are a list of these disciples in the other books of the Gospels, particularly Mark chapter 3, verses 13 through 19, Luke chapter 6, verses 12 through 16. This is where the 12 are all listed. They are not listed in the book of John. But in the book of Acts, chapter 1, verses 13, it lists the 11 because Judas Iscariot had already betrayed Christ and hung himself and was no longer with them. It's always interesting to me that Simon Peter is always listed first, and Judas Iscariot is always listed last. The order in the middle varies a little bit here and there. There are some different names, like Thaddeus, I think, is also Nathaniel, I think. I forget. I'm doing that by memory. Don't trust me on that one, okay? This part I'm not doing by memory. But it's interesting to note that in verse 1, he gave them authority. That's an interesting word. That's the word exousia. And that's the word that means strength, power, jurisdiction, or authority. So in other words, he gave them the jurisdiction, the strength, and the power to do things like, notice this, drive out impure spirits. So they were given the ability to drive out demons, unclean spirits. Fallen angels is another way of understanding that. They were also given the strength and the power and the jurisdiction to heal every disease and sickness. Now, I don't know what the difference between a disease and a sickness is, except maybe a disease is more long-term. A sickness might be temporary, like you might have a sinus infection right now. A disease might be that you are lame and you have been paralyzed or something like that. But notice that Jesus gives his disciples the jurisdiction, the power, the strength, the authority to do these things, just like he had. I think that's interesting. Now, also notice this, that he gave them this to do it. He called them to him. Notice that in verse 1. He called the disciples to him. That's very significant because they could have turned him down. They could have said, no, not this time. We've been following you. That's good enough. That isn't what they said. And here's something I want you to think about. What is God? What has Jesus called you to do? And are you willing to say yes, just like they did? Thanks for joining me.